the Broadband Communities Summit. Just to kind of give a little context for this so that those who are joining us remotely, either on Zoom or on our other platforms, are aware. Broadband Communities, I'll let some of the others, including our Broadband Communities CEO, speak to the entity, the magazine, and the summit. But it is the premier event for broadband operators, and this has been a conference I've gone to for 13, 14 years in a row. It's kind of one of the most important conferences that I am aware of in the broadband infrastructure space. And this year, for the second time in a row, Broadband Breakfast is very happy to partner with Broadband Communities for a special, we're calling it a mini conference on digital infrastructure investment on the first day of the conference on Monday, September 27th. And this digital infrastructure investment event joins the financial services and broadband communities together. We'll talk more about that in a subsequent event, a subsequent preview event 2 weeks from now. But for now, I just wanted to again, note the partnership and strong alliance with Broadband Communities. And these three-part previews are designed to lay out the landscape so that those of you who are able to attend our Broadband Breakfast sessions in the coming weeks will be able to get a complete understanding of the conference. Now, this URL I've just put on the screen is the link for this page. We've updated it with links to the other two events. So again, today will be a general overview with several of the chairs of the Broadband Community Summit. 2 weeks from now, on August 4th, we will be talking about some of the financing panels, both digital infrastructure investment and other sessions at the summit in Houston, Texas. And then the third preview session on August 18th, 4 weeks from today, will focus on the multi-tenant housing and broadband issues associated with multi-tenant housing, which has also been a very strong focus for many years of Broadband Communities. I will say one more word to our regular audience. We do this Broadband Breakfast Live Online session every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time, so that people all across the country and even Hawaii, we had some great participation from Hawaii a few months back, can participate. We intend to merge the live online events with in-person meals. That is to say, broadband lunches, right? We got our name from the Broadband Breakfast Club that we started many years ago. We're going to start those up again. It's going to be a broadband breakfast lunch. We had been planning to do that sooner than we are, but we still will start definitely by September. And so we just want everyone to have on your radar screen that we will be doing in-person events once a month beginning in September. And we look forward to sharing more details about that with you. If you come to Broadband Breakfast, you'll see about this on our website. But we just wanted to give you a heads up that there will continue to be a weekly Broadband Breakfast Live Online, and we will have monthly events that will combine the in-person and virtual component. With that, I want to open it up to our panelists for this great session today. I probably will have less, quote, moderating duties than normal because we've got very capable moderators. Sean Buckley, in fact, Sean, who's right with us here, is the editor-in-chief of Broadband Communities, and he will be moderating the next two of these preview sessions on August 4th and August 18th. But I want to, and then of course, Bob Knight. Bob is the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Harrison Edwards Strategic Communications. He'll speak later in our program. And Heather Burnett Gold is the CEO of HBG Strategies, LLC, and of course, the former well-known head of the Fiber to the Home Coalition. Welcome, Heather. Thanks for being with us. But for now, let's focus on Barbara Digarmo, who is just an exceptional leader and expert in this field. I can call her an expert. She has acquired that expertise over the last half decade as she has stepped in and led Broadband Communities following the death of her husband, Scott, whom I knew well and still miss. But Barbara, tell us a little bit about Broadband Communities, the Broadband Communities Summit, and what you would like the audience of people who are watching or who will watch this, because again, these are available immediately on Broadband Breakfast, and you can come back to these and see these. Whoever is watching this, what should they know and what should they get excited for now about Broadband Communities from September 27th to September 30th?
Hi, good morning, everybody. What we're most excited about is just seeing people. Yeah. Our lifestyle at Broadband Communities has not changed all that much because we work virtually anyway, but which means that I have not seen my staff for almost 2 years, which was the last time we had a conference. So I'm looking forward to seeing my staff. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you. Broadband Communities, we look on we have a really wide definition of community. So if you are a municipality that wants to learn something about how to wire up your own community, we're the place to go. If you, like me, look on your community as your apartment building, there's a place for you too. A large part of our program deals with the multifamily housing communities and how the problems that they have and the solutions that they have. And we are very proud to partner up with the National Multi-Housing Council for their help. In fact, we're proud of all of our people that help us with our program. We don't generate this entirely by ourselves. We do use a lot of material that comes out of our magazine, Broadband Communities, and for ideas, but we also rely on leaders in the community like Drew and like Bob and like Heather, and a group also from the multi-housing industry that put together their segment of the show. So we're looking this year to do things a little bit differently. We want to really emphasize activity, getting this done. I think in the past we've concentrated on how you convince your community that they need broadband. I think after the last year and a half, no one needs convincing any longer. A lot of it is dedicated to how to fund it. The good news is that there's a lot of money out there this year, both from the federal government and the state governments and your local communities. And we want to tell you how to take advantage of this money and how to put it to work for your community. The things that makes me really excited about the summit is the response that we get from attendees who send us notes like, we were looking for some information. I'm a city councilman. I came to your summit. I learned a lot. The next time I brought my city manager back. Now, you helped introduce us to people that could help us. And you told us what to do, we're not lecturing you. We're giving you advice from other people that have done this successfully, and now we have a big, happy, infrastructure in our community. We've got broadband, and it got us through this past year. So we're celebrating how the importance of broadband and how it got us through this pandemic, and how we're not going back. We're going to continue to expand, and we want to show you the best ways to expand and the advantages that you can get. I look on it as sort of you come to us for some how-tos and you go home with the know-how to do it. So I'm going to stop there and just say, welcome, everybody. We really want you there. it's Houston. We're excited. There's always one of the big things at the summit is the networking opportunities, and there's always a big cocktail party. This year, the Marriott Marquis, where we'll be, has a rooftop infinity pool or whatever you call it that's Texas shaped and Texas sized, and that's where our party will be. So come join us, celebrate learning and talking and listening, and leave it at that.
And being there in person. Barbara, just if I may, would you be willing to speak to how broadband communities, if you will, you have long had this very strong focus on the multi-tenant or multi-family house. I never know the right acronym to use, but could you?
It's residents, not tenants. I have learned.
Very good, multi-residential. But could you speak to how broadband communities broadened its focus and sort of where you see the future going in terms of the real and present need for broadband everywhere and at higher capacities?
Well, I don't think it's any surprise to say that there's a housing crisis in this country, and probably over the next number of years, and the people from the NMHC can give you better statistics than I can. Living in apartment buildings is going to be a big part of helping solve that, whether it's the fanciest thing in downtown Manhattan, or whether it's just a connected community within your own smaller community. And I think we've all learned that we have to have connections that'll satisfy all of us, that we can do business. I mean, in the past, it was like people would say to me, especially some of my cohorts in my building, like, why do we need anything any faster? I'm just emailing my grandchildren. Well, now if you're Zooming your grandchildren, you need a higher speed connection than what has been traditional. So the multi-family side of it is partly because they represent a large population within the country if you want to reach broadband communities.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Let's turn now to Sean Buckley. Tell us a little bit about not only yourself, Sean, and not only Broadband Communities, the magazine that you are the editor-in-chief of, but some of your role in the planning and preparations for the summit that's taking place.
Yeah, before I start that, I want to share a little anecdote. I was talking to Placentia, California, and I guess they were inspired this was before I came on board, by a summit we did in 2018 in Ontario, California, to pursue a fiber to the home plan with sci-fi and gigabit now. Anyway, so it proves that a lot of people do use the conference as a great place to kind of learn and to kind of maybe get inspired to do something of their own in their own community. So I thought I'd share that. But yeah, I've been in the broadband industry. It's crazy to think it was 23 years ago that I started. When DSL into MDUs was a big topic, and getting to know other people like Heather and others that were kind of on the regulatory side. So I've been covering it since 1998 and worked at various places, Telecom Magazine, and then Fierce Markets for almost a decade, and now I'm here. So it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, I think the key thing that we'll see at this year's event is, again, how, and Barbara just talked about it, the need for speed and the awareness that that you need a good broadband connection to conduct business, or to conduct to apply for a job or anything like that. And I think it's just created this awareness. It's not just having a great speed, but the utility of broadband. And I'm also encouraged by communities that are engaging in either public-private partnerships, like Placentia, or working with incumbents like a bunch of New Hampshire towns. I live right on the New Hampshire border that are partnering with folks like Consolidated Communications to kind of get fiber into their communities, and then also MDUs. Yeah, I'll follow up on that too. There's a lot of interesting innovations going on there to help make it, to have an all fiber MDU. And guys like Clearfield, we're going to be going to the Fiber Broadband Association show next week, and a lot of really great innovations. So those are some of the things that are getting me excited. And then, of course, again, on the regulatory side, dealing with things like mapping and educating people about the funding, different funding options. So there's a lot of, it's going to be, but I think really just people want to get back together and see each other in person, shake hands, and have that one-on-one conversation, and that warmthness of connecting with people. I think that we've all missed for almost 2 years. It's crazy. So
yeah. So Sean, let me also ask
Sure.
you a follow-up question here briefly. So I of course I've had a chance to be at an in-person conference this year. I went to the WISP America show in Grapevine, Texas in April, and I'll be at other conferences between now and September, and then of course Broadband Communities. How would you respond to someone who says, okay, well, so WISP is the wireless show and Broadband Communities is a fiber show, or the Fiber Connect that's happening next week you referred to as a fiber show? How would you kind of respond to people who say, well, this is a technology specific show? What's your kind of reaction to that point, Sean?
I think there's different options for broadband, and people are going to try to figure it out. I think obviously fiber is the gold standard that we all want to get to, but there are other options that people will explore. One option I like is kind of this hybrid sort of model that people talk about. And it's been talked about at our summit before, where people will maybe plant a broadband seed. You do some fixed wireless just to get people on board, and then you go and you transform all those folks to fiber, and then maybe you go to another community and do the same thing. So I think it's about. I think there's various answers, but I mean, of course, fiber is, I think the gold standard, but, I think there's going to be some creative people that want to do some different things. And I think that hybrid model could be interesting. When you start with wireless, go to fiber, and then, so I think there's all kinds of different options,
All right.
Well,
we'll keep all these discussions, and we'll want to get some specifics for what people can expect at the show in terms of sessions, panels, exhibits, the like. But let's broaden our discussion. Let's open up to Heather Gold. Tell us a little about yourself, Heather, about HBG and the work you're doing now and your role in the summit.
So when I retired from the Fiber Broadband Association in 2018, I wasn't really ready to retire, but I wanted to have a much more flexible schedule than it's very demanding, as Barbara knows, and I'm sure everybody who's at Fiber Broadband now will know the schedule you need to keep up as an association executive. So I thought about where could I make the most impact and what would be my background that would be valuable to people. And I realized it's broadband education. I mean, if you think about being an advocate, what are you doing but educating public policy holders? And so that has been what I am working on, is educating communities, working with companies, working with associations on educating their membership on the value of broadband and where to go to get the information they need to deploy. So that's been my focus. And a sort of sub-focus on that is getting more and more broadband to rural areas. And as Barbara said when she opened, a big part of that is not just hearing about it, it's how to do it. And I've been working very closely on a series of webinars that bring in actual practitioners of different aspects of fiber deployment. And they explain how they went about getting telemedicine or educational funding so that they could expand the broadband capabilities in their regions. Yesterday, I did one on state and regional funding, and we had representatives from 3 states plus Appalachian Regional Commission, which also does a lot of broadband funding. So I think that's my focus, is to make sure that as many people as possible learn how to get more broadband because it is critical, and the pandemic made that more relevant than ever. It also highlighted the pockets that exist in this country, particularly in rural areas, where we seem to keep investing over and over again in technologies that are not future-proof. And I think for me, we should not be investing in technologies that simply have to be upgraded in 2 to 3 years. We need to be giving people money that will enable a community to grow as its needs grow. In other words, a community shouldn't be bounded by what someone decides to invest. They should be bounded by what they need and want for their citizens. And I guess one of the things I love about Broadband Communities is the ability to meet and discuss with so many communities, community leaders, companies that are building community-focused broadband networks. And that's always been a highlight for me, because a lot of places you go and you're just talking to a lot of vendors. You're seeing a lot of large incumbents, which many do great jobs. I mean, I live in a FiOS house and I love it, but that's not going to work for every community. And so you have to figure out what will work for your citizens. And I think there's a lot of good, honest discussion about that at Broadband Communities. And that's what I've always appreciated. And so one of the things I've been working on is how utilities can change the dynamics in a given location and state. I did a lot of work last year on enabling IOUs to enter the middle mile network. And I worked in conjunction with
just define the term for us. That's a great point.
Sorry. Investor-owned utilities, which are the big guys. So I worked with an educational entity here in Virginia called New College Institute. They received a grant to study how investor-owned utilities could be further encouraged to deploy middle mile networks, and we resulted in a paper. And one of the things that we thought about a lot was the importance of partnerships. If a big investor-owned utility is building the middle mile, then how do communities get a last mile? And how do they work with other utilities or with community broadband or with local telephone companies? And we've seen that very effectively deployed here in Virginia on a utility partnership model. And that will be one of the topics in our utility track, which is on Tuesday afternoon at the conference. And then we hope to have a session on funding opportunities for utilities. Obviously, the utilities were big players. The co-ops and the cooperatively owned last mile utilities were big players in the RDOF, the recent RDOF round at the FCC. But there are plenty of other options open to utilities for getting funding, particularly if you're a cooperative or a municipal owned utility, because some of the things like these regional commissions will only fund nonprofits. So it wouldn't be open to a for-profit incumbent or an investor-owned utility. So that's a great session that we're putting together. That's a 2.5 hour block on Tuesday. And then one of the other areas that has really fascinated me, and this came up with the investor-owned utility middle mile, is the whole concept of open access. Open access entails an entity, usually not for profit, doesn't have to, it could be, but doesn't have to be, or it could be municipally owned, building the underlying infrastructure and then letting others ride it. And you could have, depending on the population, you could have 1 or 15 other internet service providers riding this network, and that entails a lot of complicated IT technology, which is not my forte, but I totally understand why it's enabling more open access networks, particularly in the last mile. And so we've put together a very interesting session with someone who is a software provider in that space along with Kim McKinley from Utopia, who has quite a few ISPs on her network, and Chris Mitchell, of course, who is a big proponent of open access networks. And that'll be Wednesday morning. And so I think both of those will be opportunities for communities to see different models and how different entities can make them work for you. And so that's what I'm excited about.
Those are great things to be excited about. And Heather, thank you so much for getting us specifically on those focuses, the Tuesday afternoon sessions on utility and the Wednesday morning session on open access. Open access has also been something we've written quite a bit about at Broadband Breakfast. And I just put a link in the chat window so you can see some of those. Those are not all, there's many more than those, but you can see that it's definitely a subject of great interest, increasing interest than just even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in part because of the way it enables many providers to offer services on a single high capacity network and really facilitates not just competition, but innovation in the services that are offered, the applications that are offered on through a service provider's network. So hopefully that's not a bit of a detour, because it really is part and parcel of some of the evolving business models. And in fact, just one more quick point before we go to our last panelist. This was a very strong focus at digital infrastructure investment last year in 2020, which of course we did virtually and shared in the virtual Broadband Communities Summit. We will do it both virtually and in person this fall at Broadband Communities. There's the link to the digital infrastructure investment, which is the first day of Broadband Communities. And we will, of course, be talking as well about open access and the financing of that, as well as other models. So Bob, you are batting cleanup here. Tell us a little about yourself, about what you do with Harrison Edwards, and some of your thoughts about the Broadband Communities Summit that's happening just two and a third month from now.
That sounds great. Thanks, Drew. Thanks for having all of us on. And before we sort of jump into that, I just wanted to make a follow-up comment on open access. I'm also a municipal official in Connecticut, where I live, and I think one of the things that's appealing about open access to public officials is that you're not picking winners and losers, right? If it's a municipally owned network, you are owning the infrastructure, you're owning the fiber, you lay the fiber, and then you lease out space to the private sector. So the private sector can compete, and there's a great free market play there. And whether it's privately owned open access or publicly owned open access, competition, Roger Timmerman at Utopia Fiber, client of ours and the largest open access network in the nation, he says competition solves everything. And I think it's true. It's very successful. So at Harrison Edwards, I'm one of the partners here. We're really the leading marketing and public relations firm for the industry. And we focus on three areas. One is engagement. It's engagement of stakeholders or political engagement. The second is advocacy, particularly political advocacy. And third is acquisition, customer acquisition, which we all sort of want to get to that point. And it's fascinating. Before the pandemic, we were heavily focused on community and stakeholder engagement and political engagement. We're trying to build political will for these projects, particularly municipal projects in communities. Pandemic took care of a lot of that. There's plenty of political will now. There's plenty of demand. So now there's a great focus on customer acquisition. But the stakeholder engagement piece has changed quite a bit. Now it's more engagement around applications that are getting built on top of networks. So let me explain. Last week I was on a farm in rural North Dakota, and the precision agriculture industry is building some of the most fascinating stuff. There's going to be probably as much investment in precision agriculture in the next decade as there has been in life sciences in the previous decade. So there's a lot of fiber that's going into the ground in North Dakota. There's plenty of fixed wireless and 5G to the farm, and it's those applications that need promotion. And frankly, sometimes you need some stakeholder involvement, right? Some of the neighbors say, "Oh, what's this tower going up here?" So you have to have some community conversations. On the advocacy side, when there's anywhere between 65 billion and 100 billion dollars about to flow from the federal government into states. There's a lot of entities that are lining up, ready to go, looking for that money. And so everyone's trying to position for that piece of the pie right now. And there's some very interesting conversations that are going on. I think Sean or Heather cited a little bit earlier about the bill. I saw a draft of the infrastructure, the broadband piece of the infrastructure bill yesterday, and we're seeing numbers like 25-3 and 100 over 20 instead of symmetrical 100 over 100. Now, as an industry professional, as a municipal official, and frankly, as a taxpayer, I find that outrageous, right? If we're going to be funding infrastructure in this country, it needs to be future-proof. We would not take transportation dollars and say, okay, we're going to now lay a dirt road. We would build a highway. And it's the same thing with digital infrastructure. It's the same thing with fiber. So that advocacy piece, we're very, very busy behind the scenes with that. And of course, customer acquisition is a big deal, right? If you're going toe to toe, particularly if you're a muni network and going toe to toe with a well-funded incumbent, you have to have your message right. You have to have your marketing materials right. This is actually going to be a very important piece for electric co-ops. They're used to being the only game in town when it comes to electricity. Now they're going toe to toe with an incumbent, typically in the same community. And so they need to make sure that their marketing assets, their message is getting out there, and they're acquiring customers at a rate that they're looking to do. So we're going to be talking a lot about marketing at the Broadband Communities Summit. And really, it's the customer adoption, it's that political will piece. And I'm particularly excited about two sections. One is open access, as Heather had referenced before. Interestingly, I'm one of the founders of the National Fiber Coalition, and it's myself and Ernesto Falcone and Kim McKinley have been working and bringing together some like-minded folks, from around the country to sort of, figure out what's new in policy, how we can help influence the conversation, on Capitol Hill. And one of the things that keeps coming up time and time again is, hey, we've got to win the Democrats, but it would be really great if we could win a few Republicans too. And in Republican circles and conservative circles, it's about the free market, free enterprise, right? And less government involvement. And so open access actually plays really well in Republican circles, because again, government's not choosing winners and losers. Government is laying the infrastructure, just as we would build airports and let the private sector compete, lease the gates. It's the same thing on an open access network. And interesting point, in Utah, where Drew, I know you lived for a number of years, Utah is one of the most conservative politically states in the nation. It's very, very, very red state, and they have more municipal networks and more open access networks than any other state in the nation. And remember, Utopia is the largest, most successful open access network. And let me tell you how quickly it's growing. Since 2009, they've had $300 million worth of successful projects that have been designed, built, financed, and operated. A third of that has come in the last 15 months. So that's the explosive growth that's happening in one of the reddest states in the country, and those are municipal open access networks. And then, of course, the precision agriculture piece. Barbara and I have put an invitation out to the governor of North Dakota. North Dakota is absolutely leading the nation in precision agriculture innovation, unmanned aerial vehicles for farming. It's not just the tractors. We're dealing with massive droughts now, in our farmlands, and soil monitoring, controlling water. You control water, you figured out farming. We have to feed more people on less land. So precision ag is going to be really the next big play for our industry as an application. And Chad Roop is going to be speaking. He is the former Rural Utility Service administrator at USDA. He's now a banker, runs a bank in Nebraska, but he has a lot to say on the subject. And I think you're going to get a lot, to our audience here today, I think you're going to get a lot out of this summit this year. We're moving it from the walking, talking white paper to a real verb. These are real actionable steps now. This is going to be a very big one this fall.
So wonderful. Thank you so much for setting the stage for us here. Lots of exciting topics, and I've got many questions here, but I want to really encourage our audience to ask your questions of Barbara, Sean, Heather, and Bob via chat, or if you want, you can raise your hand and we can recognize you. That's also a possibility on this platform. If you're on the Zoom, obviously that won't work on our other platforms. But I want to ask Barbara, could you just talk about what's new this year, right? What can people expect that they haven't maybe seen before or heard before at Broadband Communities? Why should they come back? And to kind of maybe kind of lean into that question, Barbara, could you just speak to the question of the infrastructure bill, right? And what kinds of discussions there'll be around that. Not so much financing in general, which of course we'll talk about at greater length in 2 weeks' time, but just in terms of the infrastructure funding. So what's new and what can people learn about infrastructure funding at Broadband Communities this year?
I think that when we first started putting together the program, it was like, oh, this is going to all be done before the end of September. So maybe we don't get too involved in that. But obviously it's not. And like Bob said, I mean, there's a lot of advocacy that needs to go into, let's stop, and we're taxpayers, let's stop funding stuff that we have to, and Heather as well, let's stop funding stuff that we have to fund again and again and again. Let's get it right. Let's get it something that's an evergreen that instead of trying something entirely new, you just, sit it. My interpretation, of course, is you just sit in your office and you click some kind of thing and somebody suddenly has, a gigabit down and a gigabit up rather than 25.3. I realize it is a little more, involved in that. But there are aspects of the program that'll repeat itself, say like the RDOF, getting it more and more focused on what's going to actually work. So we will have what's different to me, to back off to that, is we're going to start off Tuesday morning. I mean, we start off on Monday afternoon with sort of an informal pre-conference day, so that we have Drew's program. We have a CLIC, which is the Coalition for Local Internet Choice, puts on a program on, innovations that are going on in municipalities. We have a couple of, we have an MDU focused workshop that's on no hassle, how to get your apartment building wired up, no hassles. We'll see whether there are no hassles or not. Some mapping, interesting mapping things that are going on with Vetro fiber maps that are doing a lot of work in Maine and New England. And so it's sort of more focusing in on, it may not be so much a session on here are the things, the ABCs that you need to know to file your RDOF loan requirement, but more what happens next and how to do it.
Well,
If that
great.
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go ahead and ask the same question of others too who are involved in this program. Could you speak to again, some of you, Heather, you've already mentioned several specific things, but what do you, in general, what do you expect to be kind of new aspects of the program, or new talking points, or maybe everything's new again because we've just been through this pandemic that everyone has many people have come to appreciate. We need upstream speeds that are substantial, right? And so we're going, that kind of gives a lean in towards higher capacity symmetrical networks. But Sean and Heather and Bob, what are some of the things that you're expecting this time around that you maybe hadn't seen at a prior Broadband Communities Summit?
Well, following up on what Barbara said, I think people are very excited to be meeting in person, and I think that will drive a lot of the attendees who come to Houston. They always pull well. That's why I go. I love all the community people that come. But I think having come out of how many months of lockdown, the need for interaction in order to guarantee that you are staying ahead of the curve and uncovering every aspect of how to upgrade your own broadband capabilities is going to be top of mind for the communities and for the citizens that come, the representatives of citizens that come. And what I expect to see this time are a lot more pointed questions of the panelists, direct, like, well, you did that, how did you do that? Or what do I need to do in my state to make sure that happens? So I think the quality of the interaction will be better, even better, because people, they don't need convincing, they need the facts on getting it done.
Right. Less this year about why and more about how, because the
Exactly.
why.
Exactly.
Yes, and if you look at where if you look at where we are, the states were talking about this yesterday, unprecedented the amount of money that will be going into broadband, not just if the broadband bill, if the infrastructure bill gets passed, which we all hope it does, but just the amount of funding that is coming out of the American Rescue Plan. I think you saw the announcement in California between their state surplus and their American Rescue Plan portion, $6 billion going into broadband. Now it's a big state with a lot of holes, but here in Virginia, we're putting $700 million from the American Rescue Plan into broadband. And that's some order of magnitude more than we've put in any year in the past. So I think we're going to see that again and again, that state and local governments will be using this money that's already been allocated to deploy more broadband. So we have to get it right. We don't want to squander this investment opportunity.
So, and I think you make an important point, Heather, because states are not waiting for the feds to start funding this stuff. Because there's also, we've all seen the federal clawbacks of funds, and things get messed up in that bowl of spaghetti. So California just passed, I would call it historic legislation on broadband. You had every single Republican and every single Democrat in the Senate and the House pass the California bill. Virginia, as you said, is getting more aggressive. All the states are looking at this, and they're going to fund it. I think probably on the federal side of things, one of the things that that I've argued and a number of others have argued is that you need to allow flexibility with these monies, right? Get the monies to the states, but get the monies also to the local communities and to the ISPs who are going to actually be deploying the assets, getting broadband, whether it's fiber, whether it's fixed wireless or whatever. They know their communities and they know what's going to be needed best. I would certainly advocate for symmetrical speed fiber, but it's not going to work in every single situation. And so you do have to take that into account. I also really strongly advocate for overbuilding. I think that's incredibly important.
Say that again, Bob, because we don't hear that enough. I'd love to hear what you just said.
I advocate for, I will be on the record till the day I die advocating for overbuilding.
Overbuilding. This is the thing that's like it's regarded as like a terrible thing. We can't support overbuilding. It's like assumed that there's. So Bob, what is overbuilding? Why are some people allegedly concerned about it, and why are you not concerned about it, but in fact welcome it and want it?
Well, I think look, I'm a free market guy, right? And so I don't love the fact that you're taking. In concept, I don't love the fact that you're taking, public funds and creating competition. But there's a practical reality. We have a lot of monopolies and duopolies in this country in terms of telecom, and competition does solve a lot of these issues. And so the way the Treasury rules were initially written, and we were able to get them moved a bunch of us. And I think I have to dive more into the infrastructure bill piece of it. Overbuilding is having the flexibility to overbuild is incredibly important. Again, doesn't work. We're America. We're a big country. One size fits all doesn't necessarily work, but you need flexibility. So that's why when the Treasury rules came out and said, overbuilding is not allowed, these monies can only be used in unserved areas. Well, those projects won't even pencil, right? Because those unserved areas, they're too small. You need to leverage larger, population centers in order to, get the fiber or the broadband, however you're going to do it, out to the smaller. There's operational costs and stuff. So if you don't permit overbuilding, and if you don't push the speeds up above, 25.3, all we're doing is taking a whole lot of federal funds, and we're basically cementing the failed broadband policies that have gotten us into this national mess. And until we get serious about those two things, we're just treading water.
Yep.
So I want to come back to, thank you, Bob, for that eloquent summary there. I want to come back to a point that Heather was making, and really this very interesting development about investor-owned utilities working in partnership with other types of providers. And in my work as an attorney in the telecommunications space, we've actually worked with a lot of electric co-ops and corporate ISPs that do want to partner, that want to work in partnership and don't necessarily want to own the domain or own the space. I wanted to just get a little bit more from Heather and from the others of you. What are some of the things that need to happen, either on a policy level or on a practical level, to facilitate these kinds of public-private partnerships that you discussed and I referred to just now?
Both, and I haven't looked closely at California is getting involved in this too, but both West Virginia and Virginia have passed model legislation. And the way it works is it is only for middle mile. It must be an open access middle mile network. But the goodness for in Virginia, we have the systems that'll put it in place and help the IOUs find partners, because they'll partner to get the Virginia state money, which is called VATI, Virginia Information Technology Agency or something like that. They partner so they have a complete network. But then I have no problem paying my Dominion electric bill and knowing that part of it is going to Abingdon to get better broadband. I mean, I think as a citizen, you have that responsibility. That's the way electric rates are set. And I think we have to stop thinking about utility as a privilege of geography. And we have to think about it as a utility as an obligation to serve all customers. And when you think about it that way, I think you lose your hesitancy about allowing investor-owned utilities to recover unrecoverable costs in the rate base, because after all, it does benefit every citizen in the serving area if everyone has adequate broadband, better education levels, better employment training, so on and so forth. So I think that we have to sort of overcome that. And that's why I've been quite excited that both Virginia and West Virginia and now California appear to be looking how to encourage investor-owned utilities by allowing them to put, as I said, unsupported, like non-revenue that they don't get back from building the broadband network, they can put in the rate base.
So Heather, so I live in the second wealthiest county in America, in Fairfield County, Connecticut, and just because I'm a free market guy, doesn't mean that we're not in agreement. We have a massive problem in this country, and our telecommunications infrastructure is holding our economy back. It's stifling economic and community development. It's stifling education. It's holding back innovation in healthcare, in agriculture, in business. We're competing with China. They just make their own rules and they deploy stuff and Europe, yeah. Right? And we're sitting here. We're having these petty arguments over 25.3 or not overbuilding. I'm like, guys, the rest of the world is passing us by.
25.3 is absurd. I mean, we got to move beyond it.
We need to do something. It's time to do something. And we need to build the roads and let the economy flourish. And so we're approaching it. We're getting to the same answer from two different approaches, and I think that's really cool.
Let me
I
ask,
wanted to, can I jump in for a second too?
please go ahead, Barbara.
On the partnerships thing, we do have, several sessions that will deal with that. And we also have a 3-hour morning session on Thursday morning that's being put on by Jim Ballard and Keller Heckman, his law firm. Jim is a huge, has been a huge influence on the Broadband Communities Summit, and he's been a huge influence on the broadband industry in general. And so the specific Thursday morning one is Broadband Meets the Law. And so Jim and I were talking about all the different little things like pole attachments and the different, how do we get that in? How do we get this in? And how do we get that in? And he said, well, we'll just do a workshop that we think covers the big issues. And this is somebody that knows the big issues and partnerships and getting them, legally set up and the ins and outs of that. So if you're looking for lots of really good free legal advice, Summit's going to be the place to find it. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Barbara, let me build on the point that Heather made and Bob made a moment ago about partnerships. And I want to, again, and I'm not coming back to the multi-tenant space or multi-dwelling space just because, you have a long history of covering this extremely well. You've got a great group of people that comes to it. What kinds of partnerships are happening in that space? Because that is a very significant space, as you pointed out, both in actual and growing real numbers of people in the U.S. that are in multi-dwelling units. And how are the partnerships for the new types of ISPs or developments going to reach those markets? Either Barbara or any of the others, if you could.
I think some of the in the MDU thing, the partnerships are really more sort of between the management and the ISPs. And how, and that's a significant part of their concern too, is, bulk internet, and how do we, how do you maintain control over your individual building, blah, blah, that kind of thing. Sean deals a lot too with our MDU side, and maybe he can add some.
Please,
yeah,
go
some
ahead,
other
Sean.
interesting things going on too. I just had a conversation with was it Clearfield yesterday, and they were talking about how there's an opportunity to, like, if you have fiber in the building, you could enable nearby cell sites, and you could sell access to the local wireless operator to kind of not backhaul traffic to improve their cellular coverage. So that's an interesting opportunity there that I never even thought of. But then within the building, the people can use the broadband to kind of for building control and all these other great, items to, to make the building better. You could shut off, an air conditioning unit when someone's not, someone moves out. So there's all these other opportunities that are sort of underneath that can help the property owner themselves, along with, making your property more differentiated from others, because it's such a hot, market. But those are some of the other things that we're seeing. We're seeing, it's not just broadband into the units, but also, enabling other things like wireless, these wireless opportunities, within the units, and then serving a local, wireless operator that needs to get access and needs to expand their coverage. And maybe there could be an agreement with the property owner to get more revenue. Well, you're going to want to put your tower here. Well, great. And you pay us X amount every month, and, and everybody kind of wins. So those are some other things that I've been kind of looking at in the MDU space. It's kind of exciting.
We're getting close to the closeout, and we do have a hard stop today. But before I give everyone a chance to say a few words, I want to make sure to thank our sponsors at Broadband Breakfast. We're very grateful for Utopia Fiber, for Lit Communities, for STL, for Positron Access, for Samsung, Broadband Now, and Powerhouse Management. And we, with the help of our sponsors, we of course do this programming every week, Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. Next week, we will have some live coverage from the Fiber Connect show that's happening in Nashville. One of our reporters will be there. covering it. The week that follows, August 4th, we'll have part 2 of the preview for Broadband Communities, and Sean Buckley will be moderating that with several people talking about the financing sessions that will be discussed at Broadband Communities. We will be back again on August 11th at Broadband Breakfast live online, and then the final of our 3 preview sessions will take place on the 18th. And that one will go right into some of these issues on multiple dwelling units and the broadband coverage. So let's give everyone up to a minute as a close out. Let's do in the same order we started with: Barbara, Sean, Heather, and Bob, and then we'll thank you for being with us. So Barbara, go ahead.
I just want to welcome everybody to the summit. It's an opportunity to learn a lot if you're looking to expand your broadband community. And so it's September 27th through the 30th. I want to thank all my chairs, including Drew, Heather, and Bob, and Sean, of course. And anyway, we'll see you there. We're looking forward to seeing you. Thank you.
Yep. I'll reiterate the same as Barbara just said, but looking forward to engaging with people one-on-one and talking to communities. And that's what I love doing, is talking to communities about their broadband issues, and hoping to see some new, meet some new faces that I haven't met before, and in the community side. So looking forward to that. So that's for me.
And one of the great things about Sean and your coverage, he's always getting new communities and focusing in his reporting on broadband communities. So I just really value that contribution that you make and the breadth of knowledge. So on to Heather and Bob.
I can't wait to meet everybody that was on this call and to see us all engaged again, coming up with the hows instead of just the whys.
Bob, closing words.
Yeah, and it's the fourth major conference in close succession. So the agenda's got to be punchy, it's got to be better, and it really is. And this conference is going to be happening right around the time that the federal monies start flowing. So there's going to be interesting conversation, respectful dialogue, as we saw today, and there's going to be a diversity of viewpoints, and I think that's really important, that we keep those conversations going as well. And for those who are new to the industry, please see all of us. Come up and say hello. We would love to chat with you and to sort of welcome you into the industry. Let's let it not be, a cliquey situation. Let's just embrace it, right? And thank you for the opportunity to speak today, Drew.
Thank you.
We do need to close out. So on behalf of Barbara Digarmo, Sean Buckley, Heather Gold, and Bob Knight, I'm Drew Clark with Broadband Breakfast. See you next Wednesday at 12 noon.
Great. See you guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Later. Bye-bye.